democracy, not be dictatorial. But I'll have to be a little bit more dictatorial. Okay, so our next presenter is Dr. Mohamed Khelifi. He's an author and attorney from Tunisia. He's an attorney at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. He'll be talking about democratic backsliding in Tunisia, lessons for democracy in the Muslim world. Please. Thank you.
Hi, thank you everyone for being here this afternoon. I want to thank everyone who's here and for the invitation to give this talk about Tunisia. I'm happy to see faces I know, like people who were I was with in struggle in Tunisia and activism, like Ayman. Hi. And like people who gave me space to write, like Democracy for the Arab World Now, like Sarah Lee, thank you. I want to talk about, the title of the article is Lessons for Democracy in the Muslim World. I don't want to claim here that we're giving any lessons, because in Tunisia, always the situation is about, we're always like seen as that Arab Spring started in our country and we're giving lessons to others. So I'm just trying to highlight some key points of what happened and why the current political situation in Tunisia is like now today. The Arab Spring started in my hometown in Sidi Bouzid. So the Arab Spring is a cause that is deeply personal to me, and it affected the way I see things a lot. And it's hard to watch how democracy is being dismantled in Tunisia now in fast pace, unfortunately. So Tunisia emerged from the 2011 Arab Spring with remarkable democratic promise in a region fraught with authoritarianism and sectarian conflicts. Tunisia stood as a beacon, adopting a progressive constitution in 2014. And the constitution of 2014 was not a donation from who was in the government back then. I would say it was the result of a lot of struggle of civil society, a lot of compromises of different political powers who accepted to work together, which saved us a lot probably of conflict and saved us probably a long-term crisis. And Tunisia had the chance to hold free elections to an extent, which was very unique in the Arab region and in the Muslim world. And the civil society was empowered. I had the opportunity to take part of that as a member or an active member in civil society and see how civil society in Tunisia almost shaped or participated in shaping the political climate in Tunisia post-2011. Then, while initially what Qais Said did, the current president of Tunisia, and who ironically was my constitutional law professor in law school in Tunisia before coming to the law school here, he justified like his act as a response to political gridlock and corruption. The subsequent months marked a clear departure from democratic norms. And so I tried to investigate Tunisia's democratic backsliding and try to consider what lessons the trajectory holds for democracy in Muslim-majority societies. And the concept of democratic backsliding has gained scholarly traction in the last decade with all what is happening in the world now, especially not only in the MENA region, but I would say all over the world. Particularly the work of Nancy Bermeo on democratic backsliding. It's a fabulous, fantastic piece of work that defines democratic backsliding as the state-led debilitation or elimination of political institutions that sustain an existing democracy. This erosion does not necessarily take the form of a coup or military takeover, but may unfold through legal mechanisms and populist legitimacy. And in classic democratization theory, Liz and Stefan emphasize 5 arenas of consolidation: civil society, political society, rule of law, a usable state bureaucracy, and an institutionalized economic society. Tunisia appeared to make some progress in all 5. But yet, some analyses have attributed authoritarian persistence in the Muslim world to cultural or religious factors, like we're not fit for democracy, we don't deserve democracy. There's this whole narrative in the Muslim world stating that now we just need a dictator because we do not have democracy rooted in our culture. However, scholars like Alfred Stefan argue that Islam is not inherently democratic. There were great interventions before me about that, and that institutional and socioeconomic structures are far from explanatory. Tunisia's trajectory supports this institutionalist view. The problem obviously was not Islam. Tunisia is 99% Muslim, and even the non-Muslim communities lived for thousands of years in peace in Tunisia. But it was technically the fragility of democratic norms, lack of economic inclusion, and the personalization of power. The findings of this brief paper was first the limits of institutionalism, and that the 2014 Tunisian constitution was lauded internationally. It was to a good extent progressive. It guaranteed a lot of freedoms. It was a result of, I would say, a lot of different classes in Tunisia, including the political class, the civil society, the social movements. Everyone participated to make sure that they imposed their own view and to have a say in the constitution of 2014. It guaranteed the separation of powers, judicial independence, and individual rights. Yet institutions on paper did not translate into perfect democratic resilience. Parties were fragmented, electoral coalitions were unstable. We saw a lot of good coalitions that collapsed easily, and the judiciary remained somehow politicized, unfortunately. While the 2022 constitution, adopted by referendum amid super low turnout, around I think 20% or even lower than that, dramatically restricted the balance of power, and was clearly written by, I would dare to say, one person who was the head of state. It granted President Said near absolute authority, including the ability to appoint judges, bypass parliament. And while he made that sound or look technically legal, these changes undermined the spirit of democratic pluralism and, I would say, destroyed any attempt to build the constitutional institutions that were laid out in the Constitution of 2014. And this does suggest that institutional design without enforcement and culture of democratic practice is insufficient. Constitutions are not self-enforcing. Tunisia demonstrated how the hardware of democracy can be overridden when the software, like the political culture, the political environment, and civil commitments are absent. The second finding, I think, is the most important, is the populism and the authoritarian drift. President Said rhetoric painted him as an outsider of the corrupt political elites. He's this teacher who was not involved in any political corruption, or he didn't participate in political life, while I disagree with that. He used the very populist discourse. He spoke only in Fushan that was somehow appealing to a lot of people, seeing him as a saint or like this professor who is very clean and that is out of the political elite that we need in the scene. He used this populist discourse of moral renewal and national rescue. He appealed directly to the people, as he would like to say, often bypassing intermediary institutions. And as I said, his background as a law professor and outsider lent credibility to his promises to an extent. And this mirrors a broader pattern where populist leaders weaponize popular dissatisfaction to entrench power. In Tunisia, there was a frustration with unemployment, with political disability. People were somehow frustrated with the scenes they see in the parliament. Then COVID hit, and it's really amazing to see how pandemics can really affect like the whole political stability in some countries. And CSID, to an extent, used that to seize power. Inflation, some elite impunity created like this fertile grounds. CSID ruled by decree governance post-2021 and arrest of opponents, journalists, under anti-terror laws exemplify how populism morphs into autocracy that we're witnessing now. Yet, unlike classical dictatorships, the shift was gradual and clothed in constitutional legitimacy, a hallmark of 21st century. Even though I can find some counterexamples to this, like Alberto Fujimori in Peru, who technically is the same strategy of like this outsider person who became a politician that became this like dictator in Peru and then ended up as a fugitive. The third finding is the role of civil society, like the resilience meets repression. Civil society was definitely a pillar of Tunisia post-2011 transition. I would say even during the revolution. I remember very well in my hometown how IGTT, the national labor union in the country, was organizing some of the protests, played an important role in dialogue, even in 2015, I think. So also the Union of Tunisian Journalists and organizations like the Tunisian League of Human Rights played a crucial role in mediating political conflict and defending liberties. However, those groups under CSID have faced growing pressure. Surveillance, judicial harassment, regulatory crackdowns have curtailed civil society space. The arrest of activists, dissolution of opposition parties, restrictions of foreign-founded NGOs, always labeled now as like traitors and sellouts, signal chilling environment. And I would say even some of the biggest organizations like the labor union in Tunisia is almost kneeling now and collaborating with the regime with what is going on. So just to conclude, since I only have 5 minutes left, I would say that first, elections alone are not enough. Tunisia's story reminds us that elections, though vital, are not sufficient for democratic consolidation. Electoral legitimacy can coexist with authoritarian governance, like what is happening now. Everyone's argument is like, oh, CSID won with 90%. Why were you questioning his legitimacy? Particularly when the rule of law is weak. As Farid Zakaria notes, a liberal democracy is on the rise where leaders are elected but institutions are hollowed. Second point is populism as the Trojan horse. Populist leaders often exploit institutional dysfunction to justify radical centralization. Their legitimacy rests on a direct and immediate dictatorial relationship with the people, bypassing checks and balances. While for CSID, everyone is a traitor except him, and he's the only one who is the spokesperson of the people in Tunisia. Tunisia showed how quickly populism can become a tool of legal authoritarianism. Third conclusion is that civil society needs legal and political guarantees. We have seen how easy is it to dismantle civil society, to make the civic space shrink. In Tunisia, it's kind of very scary how things are different now. So civil society actors cannot safeguard democracy on their own. They need protection. They need legal guarantees. Laws that ensure freedom of association, independent judiciary to defend those rights, and a media landscape that fosters pluralism. In Tunisia, the erosion of these protections has made resistance symbolic rather than transformative, unfortunately. The last point is the culturalist fallacy. Tunisia rebukes essentialist claims that Islam is incompatible with democracy. We have seen attempts to have a stable democracy in Tunisia before 2019. The 2014 constitution was one of the most progressive in the MENA region. We have to give it that. Islamist party accepted secular norm, had given some compromises. Other secular parties did the same. Everyone sat on the table and talked together. And even though personally back then was hardcore opposing all of the political scene and all the political spectrum of parties back then, when I look at it back now, I see that that was a good attempt of having a stable political situation or political regime in the country. The breakdown was structural and not religious. So what happened, to sum up, is that poverty, institutional weakness, foreign pressure, and elite dysfunction in a lot of points, not Islam as a religion, undermine democracy. Thank you.